All right, welcome to the Social Thread podcast. I am Robert, and as always, I'm joined by
Rob Reinders.
Awesome, and at Social Thread, we are a nonprofit where we want to help people belong and thrive and explore their faith on their own terms. And so we've been diving into this idea from the Bible, something that Jesus talks about, and that is love your neighbor. And so Rob, we kind of wrestled with this question last time.
Yeah.
But let's do a little bit of deep dive. What's some more perspective that we can be thinking about?
So the last time we really talked about what it meant to know your neighbor, and we asked that question, like, who is your neighbor? And Jesus said, basically, like, it's anyone and everyone. Those we know, those we don't know, those we agree with, those we don't agree with. And we talked last time about, like, how do we just even make that first step to connect with somebody to get to know our neighbor. And today I want to talk more about going even deeper, so going from what does it mean to know your neighbor to what does it mean to understand your neighbor. And I think when we have understanding, that's where the good stuff really starts to happen. That's where the hard work, I think, really is when it comes to loving our neighbor. And another scripture verse from Jesus I've really been that's been kind of central to me, but is also one I struggle with a lot, is in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7, verse 1. Jesus says, "Do not judge so that you may not be judged." And that's hard because we're in a judgy world, right? We are all walking around constantly not wanting to be judged, but I think it's human nature. We're also constantly judging at some level, and there's good reason to do that. But I just hear so many people. My kids are always kind of half joking, but sometimes they're really serious when they're just like, "Don't judge me, like, stop judging me. I don't want to be judged." So how we get around the judgment piece is empathy. And empathy is different from sympathy. Empathy is about really understanding where somebody is coming from. It's not agreement with, it's not latching on to somebody else's ideas or ideals, but it's putting your own beliefs, it's putting your own judgments aside for a moment and really trying to get at the root of, hey, where's this person coming from? What's their story? What's their experience? What are the feelings that cause them to develop what they believe and how they act and how they understand the world? I've always loved Brene Brown's definition of this, and I just love all her stuff anyway. Little bit of a Brene Brown junkie. But she says that empathy fuels connection. And she illustrates empathy as someone being down in a hole of despair and being willing to climb down with them and say, "I know what it's like down here, and you are not alone. You are not alone." That's always been such a crazy, like, gut punch of a phrase for me, because we so often do feel like we're not alone and that there's nobody else in the world that's experiencing what we're experiencing, and we're just terrified to share what we're going through. But empathy says, no, other people have gone through this, and we got to be willing to come alongside one another and really truly say, "I understand what you're going through." There's also a scholar, her name's Teresa Wiseman, and she says there's these 4 components to empathy. And that's seeing the world how others see it, back to judgment, but being non-judgmental is the second point. Be non-judgmental. Understand another's feelings. And then it's not only being able to do those first 3, but the rubber really meets the road where you can communicate back the understanding to say, "Hey, I truly listened. I truly came alongside of you. I truly I fought through my own beliefs, my own prejudices, my own wanting to say, no, I'm right, or
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
experience is the right experience. And to be able to communicate back to you what you were truly saying, because I think that tells somebody that, wow, you really listened. You really actually took the time to understand where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as we talked about last time, empathy doesn't mean condoning um, actions or beliefs that we might find unethical or unlawful or abhorrent or whatever else. But if we want to create change in people, we have to understand even where the bad stuff is coming from. We have to understand how somebody got there. And once we
Mm-hmm.
understand how somebody got there, we can help them create change, and we can create change within ourselves. So
Right. Right.
um, yeah, so I've droned on for long enough now. Robert, what do you have any reflections here? You know, what do you think? How has
Yeah.
empathy been beneficial for your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned Brene Brown, because she's pretty influential for me when it comes to empathy. In one of her books, and I'm trying to figure out, I can't remember which one it was, but she talks about this idea of empathy and this filter that she uses. And this filter is, when you're looking at somebody, instead of judging, what you're wanting to say to yourself is, look at that person and say, that person is doing the best they can. Even if they're doing really, really well, and maybe struggling with something that would not be like cataclysmic, or something you would say, hey, that person's doing their best. Or you would take a look at somebody who would be standing on the side of the road holding a sign, and instead of judging that person, saying, oh, that person just wants a handout so they can buy drugs or something, that you would say, that person is doing the best they can. This is the person they're out of ideas. So this is what I got. I got a sign here at the side of the road. And to develop that empathy, to not to really shift that. And you really don't know the story of that person, and you don't know, that person might be asking for a handout so that they can buy drugs. But what you're saying to yourself is, that person's doing the best they can in the system that they're in. And just by doing that, what you're doing is, you're not taking down healthy boundaries, but what you're doing is, you're able to see, even from afar, hey, that person is doing their best, and how can I best empathize with them, and at what healthy distance can I do that?
Yeah, and I think that's a brilliant, even sort of, first step action or practice people can take.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really simple thing of just reorienting the way we react internally about how, when we see somebody, do we jump immediately to judgment, or let's create a new mantra that's, hey, that person's doing the best they can. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what if you challenge yourself to try to catch yourself every time you're out in the world, and you see somebody that you normally would have a thought of, like, oh, I can't believe that person, fill in the blank, instead
Mm-hmm.
said, hey, you know what, that person's doing the best they can, and see how that changes you. um,
Mm-hmm.
and if you really wanted to get if you want to get real crazy, just grab a friend, grab somebody you trust, and who may believe or have some different opinions or different experience than you, and just say, hey, I want to hear your story. And instead of thinking while you're hearing their story ways to rebut their experience, or to interject your own experience in there, truly listen to what they're saying, and then be able at
Mm-hmm.
the end to repeat back to them, hey, this is what I just heard you say, and thank you for sharing your story with me. And it's not a debate, it's not even really a conversation, it's a time to listen, and time to understand. I think if we all did that, we would find our lives change drastically in a really powerful, positive way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's what Jesus is getting at when he says, love your neighbor. Like, we have to
Mm-hmm.
start with the know your neighbor, and then have empathy for your neighbor. And
Mm-hmm,
then,
mm-hmm.
next time we're going to talk about action of what it means to put that love into action. So I'm excited about that conversation.
Me too. All right. Well, hey, if you're listening to this podcast maybe for the first time and you want to get involved in Social Thread, you want to be a part of a community where you can walk alongside and be alongside people who are working this out, and just go to socialthread.org and click the Get Involved link. If you're maybe want to support this nonprofit in another way, you can make a tax deductible donation to Social Thread. Go to socialthread.org/support, and you can get involved that way. All right, Rob, till next time. Great podcast, man.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Take care, everybody.